Come, let us fix our eyes on Jesus. This is Unpopular Theology, episode 21. Today we are commemorating St. Augustine of Hippo. Before we get started, go ahead and hit the like button. Go ahead and subscribe. Go over to our Facebook page. Like us over there. We post new content there every Monday through Friday. And with that being said, I've moved into my suite as I told you last week. We started classes on Monday, and classes so far are going well. I just got back from a Hebrew quiz that seemed to go alright. So that's just a little update on how I'm doing here. There are going to be some format changes to our Facebook posts. Normally on Mondays we have a devotion, or I guess the past few weeks I've been a little lax in that, to be quite frank. Yeah, we probably are going to stop doing that. I'm going to try to come up with a substitute for devotions. I just don't have the time to write them right now. That's just how it is. The Christian news we intend to continue doing. I just did not want to cover Jerry Falwell Jr., so that's why we didn't have any Christian news this week. So yeah, that's what's new. Next week's episode don't expect to be out until at least 8 o'clock Central Time, p.m., and that's just because I'm going to be in a one-time hiking class, and then once that's done, we'll be back to our normal schedule. So with that being said, let's get into our topic. Christ sought us when we did not seek him. This is Unpopular Theology. So, biographical information on St. Augustine. He was born in 354 AD in North Africa. His mother was St. Monica, whose commemoration we celebrated yesterday. And his father was a pagan. Although, if I do remember correctly, his father did convert to Christianity on his deathbed. He was an early on teacher of rhetoric, and he was very acclaimed in his rhetoric skills, very highly sought after, very well educated. He came out of the tradition of Manichaeanism. Manichaeanism is this dualistic belief system where there's a good God and a bad God, and I believe there's some elements of predestination in there. I'm not quite sure. But it's not a Christian religion, so let's just make that clear right now. And until his conversion to Christianity, he lived quite the life of degradation, to say the least. He actually fathered an illegitimate son, and he was actually quite faithful to the woman he fathered the son with, but still it was a sin. Therefore, it was outside marriage, therefore it was a sin. And when he did convert, he did send them away. He converted after many, many years of prayer from his faithful mother, and through the preaching of Ambrose, who was the Bishop of Milan at the time. His feast day, I believe, is December 7th. Yeah, he has quite the interesting conversion story. Unfortunately, I did not bring my book that has that story in it, because that was something it just slipped my mind to bring when I left for school here, so unfortunately I don't have that for you. And what Augustine contributed when he became a Christian is very significant. He emphasized divine monergism during the Pelagian controversy, which is why certain semi-Pelagians over at Soteriology 101, and I think those of you who have watched the videos the past few weeks know who I'm talking about, don't like him. And yeah, I know that kind of sounds slanderous. It's not when he claims it is. He's a semi-Pelagian, so if he embraces that label, we'll call him that. He became the Bishop of Hippo in 395 and served until his death in 430 AD. And he is considered a doctor of the church, and I would even argue he is the most influential Christian figure since the last apostle died. That would be the last apostle being St. John. And the reason I say that is because of his influence on Western Christianity. I mean, Catholics revere him, Lutherans really revere him. Luther was an Augustinian monk. And Calvinists revere him because they like his doctrine of predestination. Yeah. And some notable things, like I said, his ideas on the doctrine of God saving us through his grace without us doing anything, including deciding or accepting to follow him. He also contributed to just war theory. That's the theory that a Christian can, in good conscience, fight a war if the war is fought for a just cause, i.e., for example, defending one's country from an exterior threat or putting down a rebellion, and if it is fought in a just manner, meaning the war stays with the war, it doesn't target civilians intentionally. Augustine has many works. The first work that is major to him is his Confession. It's considered a central text of Christian philosophy. I've not read it. Most of my roommates have. And so maybe one time we'll have a discussion on that when I read it. I just haven't been able to get my hands on a copy yet. But that really details his conversion to Christianity and what he was like before his conversion. The City of God is a very interesting book. It's really one of the first documents that deals with the relationship between the church and the state. And he talks about the city of man, which is government, and the city of God, which is obviously the church. And I haven't read... it's been a while since I've read that. But it's kind of where Lutheranism gets the two kingdoms idea from. And then one of my personal favorite works, this one I have actually read, and I really wish I could find the translation that I used when I had to memorize it. He wrote the poem Late Have I Loved You, which is all about how there's a line in there about waging a rebellious campaign, yet God still seeks him, which is a very, very important thing to talk about, for Augustine to talk about. So how do we celebrate St. Augustine? How do we celebrate his commemoration? Well, of course, I have readings. So the Old Testament reading I would suggest is Genesis 12, 1 through 9. That's the call of Abraham, or Abram, as he was called before God gave him the name Abraham. And that deals with how Abram was a pagan idol worshiper over in Iraq, and God called him and led him over to Israel so that he could be the father of the great nation of Israel, and thus becoming our father through the blood of Jesus Christ. The epistle reading I would suggest is 1 Timothy 1, 15 through 17, and that's a very good reading. That's Paul sitting there and saying this saying is trustworthy, that Christ came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am the worst. That is a direct quote from verse 15, so I thought that was an important one. And then for the gospel reading, I chose Luke 23, 39 through 43. That's the thief on the cross. I think that's the most detailed account of him. And I find that important because that's about how Christ does receive sinners and does reach out to sinners to save them, even the worst of them being in their worst moment. So the hymns for today, I have two suggestions. One's in the LSB, one is not. The one that is in the LSB is Chief of Sinners Though I Be, hymn 611. It's one of my favorite hymns. Then the other one is the poem Late Have I Loved You, because it was written by Augustine, and it pretty much sums up his theology. So, in conclusion, we remember St. Augustine for his great contribution to the church, as he was, my guess is, I would say he was one of the last church fathers. And we give God thanks and praise that through his work we got to see some doctrines a little bit more clearly. So that about wraps it up for this week. Next week, as I said, it's going to be posted a little later. My apologies. I'm gonna be talking about the I guess he's a prophet, kind of, the prophet Moses and his work and what he did. So until then, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus.